Greetings. My name is Mike Graen. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the SCMRC Leadership Podcast, hosted by the University of Arkansas Supply Chain Department and Conversations on Retail. Today, I'm really excited to speak with a couple of industry experts, actually three industry experts in the RFID space. And we're not going to talk about RFID, how it works, or the fact that it is line of sight, no issues at all. We're going to talk about a topic called the ID in RFID. Well, what does that mean? That means every RFID tag at retail actually has two pieces of information, the UPC of the product and a unique serial number. Most companies don't really take advantage of that serial number. There's new capability that I think will be very interesting to people on the podcast about how you can use that serialized data for many, many things inside the retail supply chain. Please join me with Myron Burke, Senthilkumar P, and Jonathan Gregory, and they're going to be talking to us about the ID and RFID. Let's get started. Well, hello, my name is Mike Graen. Welcome to another version of the Retail Supply Chain Initiative. We are really excited today to talk a little bit about the ID and RFID. And I'm shamelessly stole that from Myron. Myron shared that a little snippet with me a little while ago, probably a month or so ago. He thought we'd never bring it up again, but he doesn't know. When he says something, I typically write it down and come back to it. So be careful, Myron, be careful. So let's go ahead and introduce the panel that we've got here today, and then I'll kind of a couple of opening comments, and then we're just going to dive into the topic. So Myron, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself first?
You bet. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Myron Burke. I spent 26 years with Walmart in emerging technologies, part of the numerous launches of RFID. Now have my own company, Divergent Technology Advisors, where I advise businesses on technology integration and strategy.
Excellent. Thank you. And you spent quite a bit of time as an operator in Sam's and Walmart as well, including doing some international work in Japan, which is a great segue into Senthil. Where are you right now? And why don't you introduce yourself and tell me where you are located, my friend?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me. My name is Senthil. I'm the Director of Research and Technology at the RFID Lab at Auburn University here in Japan for the week, but couldn't miss this event. So I'm here dialing in late. So happy to be here. Been with the lab for about 15, 16 years now. It's a blur at this point. Been with the lab since 2007. I have been part of all the major projects that the lab has worked in over the years in retail, in food, in aviation, in healthcare, and all those new industries that are coming up. And thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. And just a little bit of a integration port here. So Myron Burke, you spent at least 3 years in Japan? Is that correct?
We spent just a hair over 3 years in Tokyo with a company called Seiyu, which is owned by Walmart, now owned by Rakuten. Rakuten was our online delivery fulfiller at the time. And so we did BOPUS and delivery many, many, many years ago. So it's sort of a second life living through some of that.
So give him one place that he must eat before he comes back home. Come on now, give him some touristy stuff.
You have to go to Andy's in Nishibani. Seafood, goes to the market every day, buys it. He's a British guy. He owns the upstairs. His wife runs the downstairs. Crab legs with English vinegar is going to be one of the best things on the menu. They have their own sochu. So, dude, you have to go to Andy's.
Okay. So what's hilarious is Senthil, the light's showing up, which basically means you're Googling it while he did that. That's hilarious.
No, I'm making a note of it. Just to make sure I can forget everything that happens in this call today, but not that, I can't understand.
Well, so here's the deal. The train system there, when I lived there, the train system was incredible. You can get anywhere. So don't, just because it looks like it's a far away doesn't mean it is. So
it's not far. And the train, like literally you can take the subway actually there to Nishibani, and then you'll actually come up right underneath the elevated train, and Andy's is like 100 steps from where you come off the train. It's easy. Now that it is 100 vertical steps, so don't confuse that with
Gets a chance to work up the appetite.
We'll sync after this because we could go on on food there forever because it's amazing.
I want to hear about the karaoke too, but yeah.
Big box karaoke, man, any corner in the country.
That's hilarious. Hilarious. All right. I don't know how to segue up that. Say, Mr. Gregory, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself to segue away from this quickly, please?
Sure. Yeah. Great to be here. So yeah, Jonathan Gregory with GS1 US. I have a job that I thoroughly love because I get to support industry and advance RFID standards and adoption and use. So I've been with the company about 3.5, almost 4 years now. And before that was deploying RFID solutions first in aerospace and then in retail for a total of about 13 years. So I come into this with, that hands-on program manager experience, as well as even before that, another decade with work with e-commerce and ERP. I worked on the largest ERP solution in the world. So I come into this with a sense of like the data flows and the processes, as well as kind of the implementation challenges and things that you have to do to prove out a proof of concept, to pilot, to roll out, those types of things. So very excited to be here.
Perfect. Well, we're excited to have this conversation as well. We've all been, we did a panel a few weeks ago at the Auburn RFID board meeting. And I think many of us, Jonathan, you were not on that panel, but you should have been, because you've been in this space about 20 years like the rest of us. So we've been doing this for a long time. One of the things that I definitely want to kind of focus on is a little bit, this is a title that that Myron came up with when we were talking about Walmart a while back, which is the ID in RFID. So RFID stands for radio frequency identification. We often talk about the RF part. No line of sight, I'm so sorry. I have to edit that out later. But you basically have the ability to be able to do things line of sight, and you don't have to worry about that, all the stuff. But there's a bigger value, which I think is we don't take advantage of, is the actual serialization. So before we get into this thing, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you, if you were going to explain to your family, what is the difference between a UPC, a G1014, and its SG10? Now, because the reason I'm saying that is because there are some people out who already get that. Myron's laughing. But if you had to explain it to your family in a way they could understand it, how would you do that?
Without their eyes glazing over. Okay, so
exactly. Real quick, I'm laughing because, first of all, you got to get through the 4 acronyms before you can ever define it. What you see as kids, like, what does that mean?
My dad sells numbers. Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah. PC is a data carrier, right? It is the barcode. It's in GS1 standards lingo. It isn't the number, it is the carrier of the number, if you will. The UPC holds the G10. The G10 is the global trade item number. That is the product identifier. That G10 is made up of a GS1 company prefix, which is licensed, and so as well as what's called an item reference. But what that does is it ensures that each UPC has a unique identity because the company prefix is licensed. So you can go to any GS organization from the GS1 Japan, for example, or Senthilkumar or GS1 France or GS1 US or what have you. There are GS1 offices around the world where you can say, all right, I want to purchase a license for GS1 company prefix, and that gives you a globally unique value that ensures that your products not only are uniquely identified, but also there's a registry where they point back to you. So anybody can look up, hey, who owns this product? Who manufactured it? Oh, this goes back to such and so company. That is the product identifier, is the G10. Now the SG10, the serialized G10, is the instance or item identifier. So if I want to distinguish between this shirt and another shirt of the same style, color, size, for example, they would have the same G10, the same product ID, but they would have a different serial number. And so that unlocks that item level visibility, which is really what we're talking about here, right? It's an enormous turning point, really, and a big unlock for all sorts of applications, which I think we'll explore.
Yep. So summarizing, a UPC identifies the company and the item, and an SG10 it basically does the same thing, but assigns a unique serial number to every single selling unit at the item level, right? So if that shirt that you're wearing, if there's 10 of them, they all have the same UPC or G1014. Correct. They will all have a different SG10. So they will have a UPC and a serial number linked to them. Perfect.
That's right. That's right.
So if I'm out there listening to this, Myron, I'm going, well, so what? What does that do? Because when I think about the way most people use RFID, let's just talk about RFID without the 2D barcode portion of this. When I think about how people use that, they use that serialized information this SG10 to count the number of unique items I found and go, I just found 50 of these particular items. They all have the same UPC, but they have the different SG10. So update the on hand to be 50. And that's the way they leverage that. They can throw away all that serialized data. I don't need that for anything. Talk to us about why that's an opportunity. That's a missed opportunity to take advantage of that unique data from a business perspective.
Yeah, I think the easiest way to sort of wrap your head around this is to think about, you can pick social security numbers, driver's licenses, or I like to use fingerprints because they're unique and harder to copy. So you put a serial number into an EPC tag, you lock it. Somebody could go manufacture if they wanted to. You could do a photograph of a fingerprint and do some things with that, but it's difficult. It takes a lot of energy to do that. Mm-hmm. But as we have unique fingerprints, the correlation to, hey, I'm going to read a bunch of serial numbers on RFID tags coming into my business environment, warehouse, back room, front of store, POS, walking out the exit. So I collect all these fingerprints. It's like the FBI having a database of fingerprints. And then all of a sudden saying, oh, at the end of the month, we're just going to throw everything we collected away. So anybody who is a bad actor that you might find a residual fingerprint on and compare to your database, you just said, you know what, that database really isn't important to me. So think of any product that could have a action happen upon it, whether it gets pulled off the shelf for store use, it gets thrown away by somebody who's just pissed off at a decision their manager made and said, I'll show you, and throw a case of Cokes in the dumpster. Somebody who walks out the front door with it from a theft perspective, or there's shrink of a different format that says, hey, I miscounted, 6 cases of product A as product B when I was doing my data entry or editing a field. I fat fingered something. But I'm going to throw all that serial number information away that says I now have no historical view to go back and look at what happened. And I think that's what the serialization, regardless of the data carrier format, gives you, is the ability to know this can of Coke versus that can of Coke. And then what actions have happened to that can of Coke. And it's a term we came up with years ago, Mike, of state and status of an item at a unique item attribute level. To understand, if you gave an electronics example, this was one I used a lot, was if I pull a TV out of a box to put it on a shelf as a display item, that's still in my inventory as a count of 1. But I'll probably throw the box away, or may keep the box in the back room, because a year from now, when I change out those electronics displays, I'm going to sell that product at a discounted cost, discounted retail, let me say. So if I'm doing an online availability offering to my clients and I get down to 1, well, that 1 is my display item. I don't want to sell that one if I've got more on order, because then I've got to open another one and put it on display. So being able to say this serial number is the display, I want to block the sale or the inventory adjustment on that serial number so no one can take that out of my inventory in any way. So when I get to, in essence, 1, what I'm showing online is 0. So my online inventory is 1 minus 0, or 0 plus 1, but I don't show that 1 because I don't want to sell that. And so that's where it has financial implications and service implications to customers, because if they think you have one, you show up and it's a display, they're like, well, I don't want a display. Why didn't you tell me that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the other example we've given before is when a customer returns something that typically comes back into inventory. So if I've returned it because it doesn't work and it's going back into claims, now I've got two TVs. One's hanging on a display, which is not available for sale. The other one's sitting in the claims department because we think there's something wrong with it. My on hand would show two, but really I have 0 available for sale. So
Correct.
You're saying leveraging that unique serial number tied to a product can actually provide an inventory state, in other words.
It does. And this concept of state and status gets really big really fast.
Yeah.
Because it's based off of the amount of inventory I have, but where is that? And what is the availability or the status of that inventory? One of the big things we learned years ago was, an average shop trip, let's say it's 35 minutes. Well, if somebody picks up that product, call it the TV, puts it in their cart, walks around with it, that's still in my physical inventory till they go through point of sale.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not available to sell to somebody else. It's committed to a customer in the store and will be for 35 minutes. So when that comes off the shelf and starts moving around in a virtual cart, I want to show my online. I want to take one down because I can't sell that one twice. The same thing if someone puts it in their cart online, I want to take it down from the viewable inventory. If they pay for it, but they're going to pick it up later, now I want to make sure I've taken it down and I reserve that serial number for Mr. Michael Graen, because that's going to sit on the shelf until an associate comes and gets it. And I don't know how long that might be. So I don't want to double sell Mike Graen's TV because I've already sold it once. So, there's a really complex world created with the omni-channel, if we can still use that term, environment, and not understanding the state and status of inventories and how you deal with that in real time.
Yep.
I have a question with both of you, Mike and Myron, being involved in retail for such a long time. We're talking about ID, we're talking about state and status now that, we have this unique ID that is part of SG10. But before this became, even an option that we are, talking about today, how was state and status handled retail? Was that an option at all?
It really wasn't. No, it wasn't optional. It's something we coined out of work on annual inventories. Working the TV display example was one of the real drivers of sort of coining that term of a state and status strategy. Probably like in 2009, because you had to go look at it. And when you're doing, if you've worked with a Washington or any of those inventory services group, they'll put stickers and tickets on things that they've counted. And you'll have a pre-count ticket for a display. Say, hey, I'm going to put this in a pre-count and count all these in advance, or I'll have a do not inventory ticket. Well, sometimes when you post audit that, you'll find out, oh, we put a DNI on something that should have been pre-counted, or we didn't pre-count this, or somebody actually counted it twice. And so there was a lot of human error, because if you did the pre-counts, but I was doing the physical count, we didn't talk, I may come by and count all those displays, not knowing you've already counted them. So all the data synthesis from that type of observational interaction happened after the inventory work was done. And then you had to go back and spend 24 hours auditing it and reconciling it. It's called a reconciliation process. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, let's put the audit and reconciliation into the actual data flow. And if I see that serial number from two different sources, I can know that's been double counted at two different time and date stamps. Then if you put geolocation into it, you can know it's geolocation, login ID to user device. I can say, oh, that came off two different computers at two different times on the same day, and we influenced our inventory. So adding this use case to receiving, choke points between, is it a transportation problem? Like, is somebody pilfering my trucks? Do I have a DC in, DC out problem? Do I have a store in, store out problem? I can find out where my discrepancies are happening and then go investigate where the problem process is with this state and status theory. And I get visibility to what has sold and walked out the front of the store. So now I can look at true walkout shrink versus paper shrink or process shrink. Then if somebody brings something back, I know, hey, did we sell that? at the store? Did we sell that at this company? Did that come from a different company? Is it returned sellable? I'll put it back into inventory immediately. Is it claims, as Mike was talking about, it goes to the back room and it's defective, so I can block that from future sales. So if I read that on the sales floor or at POS, I can send an alert to say, hey, this is a non-sellable item. Pull it and take it back to the floor. Now I can measure performance metrics on how long it takes to do that. You can go as deep as you want. Right now, we're still on level 1, which is inventory accuracy. But if you throw away that data and don't run the serial number through your systems and store that, you lose the ability to do all of these extended use cases that deliver extreme value from a tag that you're already paying for just to get a count. Yep. And that's where the leverage of this technology comes in. And whether it become a 2D barcode in the new digital link standard with Sunrise 2027, which allows you to have a serial number and a barcode that is the same serial number in the EPC. So I don't have to read it at POS. I can actually scan it at POS and say, oh, that serial numbered product, whether it's a barcode or an EPC, was scanned at POS, so I know it was sold. So now I can reconcile both from the human readable and the RF readable. So we've been, that standard is a big unlock for this state and status capabilities across the GS1 standard, from case and case or pallet, case, interpack, item, all the way through that level, having that digital link capability to the 2D barcode. So and question, because it kind of pulled it all together.
Yeah, just to build on that, Senthil, state and status didn't become a high priority until you decided to fix everybody's on hands. Because when your inventory was 50% accurate, you really didn't need to on-hand status because they're so screwed up anyway. We were just guessing and putting buffers in and all that kind of stuff. Now we've got our inventories closer to 100%. I won't say 100%, but closer to 100%. Now suddenly I'm down to, I've got 2 TVs. Are they really available for sale or not? So that's what this has become. Jonathan, I want to switch to you real quick, because I think this is not a GS1 question. You've also been spending quite a bit of time on the whole claims process, right? And so leveraging that serialized data is a potential unlock for claims elimination, or at least, be able to resolve those claims issues, right? Because the old days, I shipped you 100. Well, I only got 50. Well, I shipped you 100, and back and forth, back and forth. How could potentially people use this extended SG10 information to discuss, debate, or have evidence that says a claim is a legitimate claim or it's not?
And Mike, just so you know, my internet connection is now unstable, so you cut out and got in, but I got the end of your question, so I'm going to get you. But you claims compliance and the leveraging of item level serialized data within claims compliance. Is that correct?
Correct. Okay. So how can you use SG10 information to help reduce the claims between a supplier and a retailer?
Gotcha. So, the prior conversation was very interesting. I'd like to start with a certain observation and carry it forward into this if I could. So what Myron was talking about was the value of serialized data, right? And there are multiple points of value. One of the more kind of basic observations is that I can barcode scan a UPC barcode 5 times, the same thing, and I can misrepresent accidentally or on purpose that I have 5 of these items instead of just 1, right? Whereas a serialized barcode or RFID is going to give me there's no chance of overcounting, right? And the same is true. We've seen in factory settings where somebody is placing items, let's say T-shirts or something, into a case or carton to ship, and there have been observations about barcode scanning of those items as they flow into that carton, right? And that sometimes the individual, if it's getting close to noon and the truck's at the door and we need to get moving, they'll scan the same barcode because you'll see the timestamp, right? Barcode, right away. Okay, this person was just getting it out the door. And what we've seen is that there's a significant labor savings simply by having an RFID reader scan those. Or if you don't want to go with the RFID reader, to Myron's point, you could use a 2D barcode that gives you that item level information, that serialized data, so that I know exactly what globally unique identity of each item within each case carton. That's really interesting, because when I do that, that's an unlock for claims compliance. So now the factory can report to the brand owner, say, hey, these are the specific items that you should be able to expect in this case carton. That's a big unlock. That is an unlock at many levels, both operationally, simply being able to read those tags at line speed as they flow through. Hey, I read all the tags that they reported. That's helpful. But also from a claims perspective. Oh, we didn't receive all the items. Okay, well, here are the serialized items that I reported sending to you. Can you tell me, which one of these you did not receive, have not read? Oh, you know what? Now we did find them. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're doing is we're systematizing something that's a very laborious and time-intensive and kind of painful process in that context.
Yeah. Well, you've got proof. I mean, when I was with P&G and Myron was with Walmart, I shipped you 20. Well, I only got 10. Well, I shipped you 20. I mean, we have no data to basically say what we usually end up doing. Say, fine, we'll just cut it in half, and I'll pay you the money on the claims of that. Now I have the ability to say, no, here are the 20 unique serial numbers I put in that box. You go scan your system somewhere, and if you've got any of these 20, you got them. I don't know what happened in your receiving process, but you got them, or you didn't get them, one or the other.
Mike, there's an interesting step behind that Jonathan was talking about that starts to get unlocked with this as well, which is if you can show what I shipped and what you received match, then you start to unlock visibility into another black box, which is PO substitutions or approved short shipped authorizations that don't get keyed back into SAP and the enterprise systems, because it's an email from account rep to buyer or buyer to account rep. And so we've seen some things with the PO substitution where it's like, oh, I ordered 100 green shirts, assorted small, medium, and large. You shipped me 75 green and 25 blue. Yes, I shipped those because 2 weeks ago, buyer Betty, and nobody named Betty in particular, just random name, but buyer Betty said she would rather us get the 100 units, so they approved 25 via email. We stuck them in there to meet the must arrive by date. So as you see pressure on these other metrics like must arrive by date and ship in full and different things like that, you see a lot of process decision exceptions that don't always get rekeyed into the system. The PO gets approved for a substitution, but we don't go edit the PO because that triggers a lot of other paperwork in the enterprise platform, and we just want to get the inventory there to serve the customer. All the right goals, but because of the way systems work, it creates other opportunities that, we don't know how many times that approval is being given to modify a PO without the right entry points.
Yep. Great point.
And I would just add to that you highlight another point is that, say, gray market tracking. So by having serialized data, I can now say, oh, this is interesting. This item, I shipped it to this distributor, but I found it in this new market, right? And so that's another unlock. Again, regardless of the data carrier, regardless if it's RFID or barcode based, and we'll talk later potentially about Sunrise 2027 and the advent of 2D barcodes where consumers are using, say, QR codes to investigate, to look up product information, and that's a rich data source of both for gray market and as well as product authenticity.
Yep.
Yeah, and there is a lot of projects that are happening at a lot of brands and a lot of suppliers to address this problem, right? Whether it is gray market counterfeiting, and they get stood up as traceability projects independent of RFID, and at some point they all realize, hey, we have this thing called RFID on all of our products, and that has a unique ID that's already part of the item, right? So why are we building something from scratch, right? And having two unique IDs while we're struggling to make use of one, and that's pretty much a common theme that we are seeing in some of the recent deployments with RFID. Is as these deployments grow and mature, we're seeing a group that's working on traceability for a number of use cases, come into the RFID project, who is doing RFID primarily for inventory accuracy. And they're using the uniqueness in the RFID more as requirement so that they can differentiate tags when they're reading them. But then they realize that they have each other, and we're seeing a lot more collaboration in a lot of areas at this point. So it's very encouraging.
So Senthil, just throwing out a number. Let's just say there's 100 RFID implementations at retail. Okay. 100. I'm sure there's many more, but let's just say there's 100. How many of them are actually leveraging this serialized data versus really just throwing away that serialized data and use it to be a counting machine? And I don't want to share any confidential information about what you know, because you know a lot more about what's going on in the industry, but is the industry starting to take advantage of this unique data source, or is it still just, I'm just using it to get my own hands right?
So majority of them are. There are a few deployments who have had traceability as part of their foundational use case that have used it from day one. There are even brands who have generated these IDs and tracked them through the supply chain, but that's more of an exception than norm at this point.
Okay.
They have pretty much everyone that has adopted RFID at scale at this point has started with inventory accuracy as the primary metric, as we all know. And when we look at inventory accuracy, to Myron's point earlier, there are, even if they wanted to, make use of these uniqueness, the systems that they had didn't support a lot of these. The concept of state didn't exist, right? The concept of uniqueness didn't exist. So they were all, I think, trying to solve the inventory accuracy, which is a burning problem. So they all took, this rich data of, I have these 100 unique numbers, but my current system can only handle things at a quantity level. So I'm going to compress them as 100 units rather than 100 unique units and plug it into an existing system. And a lot more work needs to happen now that, this data is available, is, in going now and building those systems. So we're seeing a lot more of that happening now that inventory is being addressed as they think about second order use cases in retail. But it's moving in the right direction, but not as fast as it should be.
Well, one more question on this for all three of you, and then I want to get into the Sunrise 2027 opportunity. My sense is legacy systems. That's a big, broad term, right? SAP systems, MRP systems. Jonathan, even the traditional EDI platforms that we have today don't do a real good job of handling that additional lower level of detail, which is the serialized. Do you guys think that that's going to be one of the major stumbling blocks to finally, I mean, we can certainly do some pilots, but if you want to plug this into a platform of moving product throughout the supply chain, those systems don't have that data in it. How big of a barrier is that?
I think that's probably the biggest.
Oh, go ahead, Senthil. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Japan,
I think
Japan
that's probably
first.
the biggest. I got to get to bed. So I think that's probably the biggest barrier at this point, especially for anyone operating at scale. Everybody understands the value behind it. Everybody sees the the use cases that could be enabled if we could trace this uniquely, not only at a given point, but across the supply chain. But if we look at all of our systems right now, they're all built to, manage things at a quantity level,
Yeah.
At a single point, and more importantly, as the data flows through the supply chain, right? So we are not even close. So a lot of these systems are being built at this point. But I think that's where, the improvement in technology, the availability of, computing and, resources that we are seeing in the industry is helping us, catch up.
Yep. Jonathan?
Yeah, I would just add that, I agree with you, Senthil. It requires middleware, right? It requires this new software entity that's between all the data, what's happening in reality that your, say, RFID readers are reading, and these corporate systems that typically don't operate at a serialized level. So that middleware tends to, you have to have these strategic decisions that you make. Well, how much business logic am I placing in my middleware? What is that line between operational logic versus core business logic, and am I diverting or have a divergence between kind of the strategy of my middleware and the strategy of my core systems. But then that also seeps into, like you mentioned EDI, it seeps into how do I communicate with my trade partners, right? Well, if I'm operating at a product level, not an item level, then obviously my EDI transaction or other communications are going to operate at items levels, right, as well, or product levels. So there's that element there. So the sharing layer is one of the things we talked about claims compliance earlier. That's one of those opportunities and barriers to overcome, because that requires more than one party. Like, so a lot of RFID solutions start in the sales floor or in the store, because that's self-contained, right? You can control that environment, and you can very easily pull out these use cases and value cases. But you start sharing data with trade partners, well, that requires more coordination and therefore tends to lag behind the other adoption use cases.
Yeah, I think the broader complexity behind this, Mike, is when you get into ERP and WMS systems as well, that they are holistically once a day batch programs, in some cases that are brilliantly designed twice a day, 12-hour shift type scenarios that say, and I think we overuse the word real time in these scenarios, because I'm not going to go change my massive WMS or ERP deployment that's just been put in. And I think maybe one company has a plug-in for some of this sort of real-time serialized data stuff out there today. But as retailers adopt it, those big systems will evolve and have those capabilities. And we need to be better prepared to describe the functional use cases that need to be designed into those. Because years ago, when you were writing shipping and things like, it was the old yellow pad that you started with, and it became a form. And then we digitized that form and scanned it into computers and optical disk storage and things. So that cycle is not going to change. We'll continue to evolve in this. But I think using those things as what I'd call a crutch or an excuse to say, this is why we shouldn't do it. Well, those systems won't be designed optimally until you start having a robust set of how would you change your business data flows using real-time data and edge-based middleware and firmware to make decision logic to get that product to the customer better, faster, or maybe even you could sell an out of stock to a customer in the store at the shelf and have it drop shipped from the manufacturer's warehouse to their home, and not make them come back to the store at all, and give them a really great experience because you took care of an out of stock situation and got it to their house in 48 hours or whatever it was in a meaningful term. That's a use case that really needs to be expanded and explored to capture the relevant information, because now it's not B2B, it's not P&G to Walmart in your example earlier. It's a Walmart, it's P&G to a Walmart customer at that customer's home. So now P&G needs different information, which now gives them the ability to get some of that customer shopper information and do follow-up marketing things as well, which enriches the whole data suite and the lifetime value proposition to a brand.
Yep. Awesome. Well, we're going to transition to one last topic. I mean, we can spend all day talking about this stuff, but Senthil's got to go to bed. So Senthil, for years, we have talked about the SG10 being pure with no, what I would call intelligent information in it. So it's got a UPC and it's got a serial number, but we don't want to assign any kind of intelligence to that serial number. We want it to be a unique serial number. A lot of people have tried to embed, hey, can I put a date in there? Can I put this in there? Can I put an attribute in there for that specific product? Maybe it's, when does this product get outdated? Or what is the DOT number of that tire? Or what is the MEI number? I always say that wrong, of that cell phone, et cetera. I believe we have an unlock between, I think, with what Auburn and GS1 are working on, which is, hey, we might be able to, with this thing called EPC Plus, and maybe it's a linkage to Sunrise 2027, putting some additional intelligence into an RFID tag, so I don't have to go back to a database for that attribute. So walk us through that. I may have just blended two projects together, and if so, I'm sorry. Maybe, Jonathan, it's a whole nother podcast about 2027. But walk us through what you guys are thinking and what the industry looks like in terms of getting that information at RFID so you can actually look at attribute data.
Sure, Mike. So I think, there are, a lot of products that we are tagging right now that don't have anything other than a G10, So for those, adding a serial number.
SG10,
yeah,
right?
So
yeah.
Pre-RFID, all they had was a G10.
Oh, G10,
right? So
got it. Okay.
If you took a pair of denim, all they had was a, G10,
Yep.
So adding a serial number to it and making an SG10, that's the best thing that could happen to that pair of denim. But there is, when you move beyond apparel, when you move into new product categories, there are, additional, sometimes serialized information that are part of those products that exist already. So for example, using your example of DOT number for tires or IMEI numbers for cell phones, those have been, used to uniquely identify those products even before SG10 became relevant to those products for various other use cases. So I think one of the conversations we have been having for the past 10 years is how do we bring this together, right? We're creating a serial number that is part of SG10 that is required to make RFID work, but then we have this whole lot of other information that is critical to the product but exists in its own world and might not be readily accessible, when it is needed. So I think where we are having the conversations at this point is trying to understand, is there value in adding that additional information to be part of the SG10 itself? So when you're reading the SG10, would it make sense to know, or is there value in knowing the IME number at that point? Is there value in knowing the DOT number at that point, right? And in use cases where that makes sense, I think a lot of effort that has been put out by GS1 in updating the data standard that they released, I think it was a month ago, I think, enables that, clarifies that, and has been building a lot of awareness and education around it. So I think there's a lot more to come, but I'll let Jonathan add, some more details to where we are and where we'll be headed.
Yeah, thanks, Senthil. Yeah, it's such a great topic. So yeah, the TDS 2.0, the tag data standard, basically, which governs how data is structured in an RFID tag, right? That was updated August 2022. And what it allows you to do is to add any, we call it an application identifier, right? So an application identifier could be a batch lot. It could be a date, like an expiration date or packed on date. It could be a net weight, it could be a country of origin. Right? There's a whole library of AIs. And so what you can do is you can now add that data much more easily than you could have done in the past to an RFID tag, and you can search on it as well. So what you can do is say, okay, like in a food setting, like a food service, retail grocery setting, you could say, okay, I'm looking for all the tags here that expire tomorrow. Everybody who's expiring tomorrow, raise your hand, right? And only those tags that meet that criteria will respond back to you, right? So there's a lot of operational efficiencies that this brings. And you think about in the apparel and general merchandise space, like health and beauty items, will have a batch lot and expiry. So how do I manage these things so that I make sure that I'm not putting onto the sales floor something that somebody's not supposed to purchase? And then another point is like the country of origin, that actually has interest as it relates to managing customs and tariffs. So if I source from one country and ship to another, then it might be more expensive than if I can prove that no, I sourced from this other country. So it is a really exciting new development. I think that the food and pharma spaces are the kind of the most urgent need users, if you will, of this new tag data standard, but it definitely has applicability in the AGM space as well.
Awesome. Senthil, from your perspective, I cannot do what he just described in a current 96-bit tag, right? We've got to keep the SG10 in bar. So what is it from an ARC perspective or a tag perspective? What are going to be the physical requirements of the tag to be able to enable that to happen?
So the most fundamental thing that is needed to make that happen is we need a chip that can hold more data than 96 bits, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that is becoming more of a reality, where with enough interest from industries beyond apparel, we are seeing solution providers taking that seriously, because the last time they'd had a higher memory chip that was, feasible for any retail application was, 6, 7, 8 years ago, and they've not had a lot of innovation in that space. But with use cases being, requiring these higher memory tags, and GS1 working on all those standards that make those adoptions easier, that's becoming a reality. So probably in the next year or two, we'll see that becoming an option where we'll have chips that can hold more data. And once that becomes available, then there are going to be tags that are built using those chips. And once that's done, we, from a performance standpoint, will make sure that those tags have the same performance as the tags that we are using currently in retail, so that they don't, interfere with the current execution or the expectations of performance. And then once they meet the requirement, we'll put it on the list, and then people can choose one versus the other based on their use case and needs, and they should be good to go.
Yeah. And just to clarify, if I have no interest in this, tag data standards 2.0 and this extended data for my use case, the tags and the chips, et cetera, that I'm using today won't go away. That capability still exists, only if you want to take advantage of some of this other stuff. Well, guys, we're at the end of the podcast. I want to give you guys all kind of a 30-second wrap up. Any final thoughts that you've got? And we'll start with Myron.
My final thoughts would be is, whether you're looking at new tag data standards or you're looking at inventory accuracy or any point in between, is don't just do what everybody else is doing because they're doing it. Really take the time to put at least a small team together to go into your business and understand, what data do we need? Where do we need it? What problem is it solving? And with what speed and frequency do we need that, right? Because you can build in some capabilities and some cost or maybe some performance challenges that can limit you, depending on what type of systems and data infrastructure you have, to do truly real time. And so I think you really got to step back and think about it and put some things on paper with some decision logic and say, what gets us in the game? What drives value for our company first? And then where can we actually eliminate problems at the source versus eliminate the symptoms of a problem? And I think that with the ID part of a serialized inventory aspect is massively powerful to an organization if you really take the time to understand what it can do for your business. Again, I compare it to social security numbers with people, or an FBI biometric database with profiling criminals or bad actors in the world. It really gives you some unique perspectives.
Awesome. Thank you, Myron. Senthil?
I'll echo Myron's thought, right, which is it all, at the end of the day, comes down to the use case. It's not, technology in search of a problem. I think we have done that with RFID, where we have identified inventory accuracy as the use case and, used RFID to solve it. Now, I think it's time to rethink it again, now that we have a unique ID that is more of an afterthought at this point, now understanding that is available, but not using it for the sake of using it, but trying to understand, what does it enable, what can we do with it, and what needs to happen, for that to become a reality, and bringing everybody into the conversation, not within your own company, but all your partners, whether it is, retailers, suppliers, brand owners, technology providers, standards bodies, and putting everybody's head together and creating a roadmap of, this is what we need, this is the data, this is the value we can get out of it, and forming a strategy so that we can make the best use of it, rather than it just becoming another POC that, makes a pretty slide deck.
Okay, well, we've had a chance to hear from a lot of folks on their closing comments. Jonathan, just want to give you a chance. Anything that we didn't cover, or anything you want to make sure the audience is aware of?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So I just wanted to highlight that standards drive interoperability, and interoperability drives business agility. To think of standards as another form of infrastructure, just like we use highways and online, broadband and phone systems and all that. These are commerce standards. So why wouldn't you want to be connected into that system of standards that connects you with others in community and is maintained as well? And to that end, my second and final point would be to focus on connections. So starting within your organization to be well connected with the different organizational silos and interests within the organization is talked about. RFID solutions have to work for everybody who touches them. So taking that into account, having good a cross-functional mindset there, and then not only inside your organization, but then think about your industry and your supply chain. How might an RFID solution relate to that? How are the standards being used across your specific set of trade partners, then finally across the entirety of the industry? And that's where GS1 US can be helpful in providing connections, work groups and discussion groups and other types of forums for the entirety of industry to come together. So yeah, those are my final comments for you, Mike.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Senthil. I know you get the farthest traveled award to attend a podcast all the way over in Japan. Thank you for your time, Myron, as always. And then Jonathan, great comments, great summary close. I hope this has been helpful about the whole idea of ID and RFID. And we just thank you for your time today and look forward to hearing on another podcast. I hope you enjoyed that podcast about the ID and RFID. Many features, many capability, which is a key unlock of leveraging that serialized data. One of those that were mentioned in the podcast was the ability to leverage RFID in the food part of the business, to use it for aged inventory, for product rotation, for markdowns, and some things like that. Join us next time as Adam Anderson, Jonathan Gregory, and myself talk about this topic, about leveraging the actual RFID technology in the food area. Look forward to talking to you then.